Thanks for coming back. You know, it would do you good to get like the DVD, The Passion of the Christ, or hop onto YouTube and look at The Passion of the Christ, because it gives a very, very clear description biblically of the encounter or the testimony of what it is that Jesus did. But I'm going to explain it to you and break it down to you. Okay? So Jesus, in a nutshell, his name means salvation. Sozo, salvation, to save. Okay, that's his name. You know, you would do good even to look up what your name means, because all of our names have a meaning and a definition, and I feel that names are very powerful, and so are numbers. Numbers are very powerful, but I won't get into that right now. So here he is. You know, when God looked down to the earth and you know, he saw the mess on the earth and people lost, he said, what am I going to do about this mess? And Jesus said, Daddy, I'll go. I'll go and I'll lay down my life for these people so that they can be reconciled back to you, Dad. And Dad said, would you really? And he said, sure thing, Dad. I'm going to go and I'm going to lay down my life for these people. So here's Jesus. He gets born miraculously of a virgin. And he gets born into the world. At that point, there was massive stirring. There was like a big argument, or there was a big riot, you could say, with King Herod, because what he did at that point when Jesus was born is he'd found out that there was a king that had been born into the earth. And he took it so personal that he had to find out where this king was. So in his anger, he went out and lashed out and said every child that's born under 2 years has to be murdered. And so he did. That was around about the time Jesus was, no, it's exactly round about the time between Jesus' birth and 2 years old. Just to clear everything up, he made sure he went ahead and slaughtered all the children under 2 years old. But at that point, God gave Joseph and Mary a dream prior to this outrage of murder, and said to them, go to Egypt, run ahead, because there's going to be a big thing happen on this, you know, in this part of Israel where you were born. And I want to make sure that Jesus is kept safe, and so are you. And so then after a few years, it was a 3-year break, Jesus came back and he was born, and he was basically brought up in Israel. Now let's fast forward. I won't get into too much detail, but here's Jesus now. And he's been betrayed by Judas, one of his right-hand men. And here he is going now to the journey of the cross. Now I want to make you understand that Jesus going to the cross was like a modern terminology of the electric chair. But his journey means so much more than what we saw in the movies growing up with Easter time and what have you. They didn't give you all of the exact details, but again, watch The Passion of the Christ, because it does break down in intricate details exactly what Jesus did. And if you want to find out and you want to know where Jesus did or what he did, it's in Isaiah chapter 53. Read Isaiah. It's in the Old Testament, the book of Isaiah, chapter 53. And mind you, Isaiah means, I'll go with the numbers. 53 means 8. Well, you plus them, 5 and 3 is 8. And Jesus' name numerically is 8. So if you're looking for the breakdown, go to Isaiah chapter 53. Now here he is. He's got this journey. He's going down the path of giving his life as a sin offering for mankind. But you must understand, now here's his journey, and he begins to undo exactly what it is that Adam and Eve did at the Garden of Eden. So let's go. He goes to the journey and he gets taken by these soldiers, and they took his clothing away. So now it says in the Bible that he's naked. And the nakedness, my friend, he was basically undoing from the time of Adam and Eve, represents shame. They took his clothes, it says in the Bible, and they tore them and they ripped them, and they gambled away his clothing. And then they put this other clothing on him, like a robe, and they mocked him, and they twisted some thorns that were around 9 centimeters, and they put them on his head, and the soldiers began to mock him, and the the crown represents your crown. You see, everything he did represents something that covers the law of sin and death. So the nakedness was for our shame. Yes? The mocking, the pulling his beard and the spitting of his face on his face was because of the words. You know, when you get words spoken over you, the verbal abuse, that was because that was under the law of sin and death. They spat at him, they mocked him, they pulled his beard, and they said, "You're not the King of Jews." And they spoke words over him that were basically hurting his demeanor and his character. The thorns were for the crown, your thinking, your mental torment. You might be facing schizophrenia or bipolar. You know, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, and your ears are the door gates to your mindset, to your soul. You see? Back in the days, in the old times, if two nations went to war, the best way of describing a victory would be to kill the head, which is the king. You see, Lucifer is out for your head. If he can have your mind tormented, then the rest of you won't operate, it won't work. So here's Jesus. They put the crown on his head and they basically said to him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" They stripped him to nakedness for his shame and the fear and the guilt that represents nakedness. Could you imagine? I couldn't see my son visibly naked and dying for innocent people. Then they bent him over, my friends, and they lashed him with a 9-tail whip. Back in the Jewish history, those 9-tail whips had stones and glass bits and nails all connected to the 9 tails. And when they bent him over, they gave him 40 rounds of slashings over his back. Biblically, it says 39, but what they do back then is they go over in case the man that's whipping missed one here and there. So to cover, they basically whipped him 40 times over his back. And these 40 or 39 whip lashes on his back represents 39 major diseases of the earth that fall under the law of sin and death. You see, the law of sin and death, my friend, represents sickness, disease, fear, torment, mental abuse. Don't go away. I'll be back in a moment. We're only having a commercial break.